So I also want to point out that I used R as part of this presentation. So some of the things that you see were developed in R in connection with Neo4j. So not every single thing happened in Neo4j. When I was looking to start this project, there were three things that I wanted to kind of prove about Neo4j in my mind, which is I wanted to make sure I had a data model that was understandable. This is like the #1 thing when I work with clients, is producing something that they get. I also wanted to make sure that exploration of the data was easy, that once the data was someplace that people could find out new insights, new things very easily. And then finally, I wanted to create recommendations. A lot of what we do in data science is prediction or recommendation of some kind, and I really wanted high quality recommendations. I was inspired to do this project to understand kind of food and its connection to health. And let me just talk about what motivates. Again, I'm in public policy. And the obesity rate, and this is a graph of the obesity rate in several countries. The United States is at the top, England is the second line, and it goes down with Spain and France and South Korea. And so this is the percentage of the population that actually has a body mass index over 30, which is what classifies someone as obese. And so, as you can see, there's been a pretty consistent upward trend. This is a problem. This is something that's happening all over probably the developed world and doesn't seem to be changing very much. So this is kind of my motivation for this project, but I'm also motivated by data, because I'm a data scientist. And there was this great data to be used. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States does an annual survey called the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. And it's where they try and understand what people are eating, how they're eating, and how it connects with their health. And so this data was available. I used the year 2012 because that was the most updated and the earliest that I had to use, or the latest that I had to use. This particular data had over 9,000 people in it, from age newborn all the way up to 80. And it really tracked all food and drink consumption for 2 days. So I knew exactly what people ate for 2 days. So let me kind of translate this kind of in pictures. So this is what I have in the data. I know who somebody is. I know, demographics about their gender, their age, their ethnicity. I know what they eat and how much. So that's kind of that middle picture, and kind of what is related to, what they eat. I know when they eat it. So at lunchtime, snack, breakfast, tea, dinner. And I know where they eat it. So it could be at a fast food restaurant, a fancy restaurant, or at home. This data actually includes over 5,000 different foods. I mean, the United States is a melting pot. There are people from everywhere, and there are just a whole host of different foods that people consume. Everything from ethnic foods all the way to brand name foods like Rice Krispies are in this data. This data also has 90,000 meals in it. So when you take those 9,000 people over the period of 2 days, they're registering around 10 eating situations or events, each by themselves. And then I also look at food characteristics, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in detail, but there are over 4,000 food characteristics. So really, this is where Neo4j comes in, because I'm like, how does this connect? I know how to use this in SQL. I know what I'd have to join. I know kind of the standard statistics and analytics you would use for this project. But I really wanted to look at it differently and see how I could use this data in a way that's accessible. So this is my graph data model. And again, it's really formed in a way that's accessible, but also to help me figure out how to make good recommendations for people. So you see the young man on the right. This is an event that he has. So we start with the person. And like I said, there's data about the person. So there's a person node, and then I have all these characteristics about the person. The gender, race, ethnicity, age. BMI is what we care about right now the most. But I also have information on where they spend money, whether it's in a supermarket, eating out, carry out, these kinds of things. So it's actually a pretty rich data set that's associated with the person. Now, I relate that person to what I call an eating event. So an event is something that happens at a particular time at a particular place. I kind of struggled when I first started working with this data, what's the best way to represent it? And I felt like eating events got at the concept of how people really do eat. So really what you're looking at here is a young man having a midnight snack. His snack is happening at the 24th hour on Friday night, and it's happening at home. And the food that he chose or consumed was a cookie that happened to be chocolate and vanilla. And associated with what he's consumed, I have all this information, where that food came from, how much of it that he ate, and all the calories, all the nutrition stuff associated with it. And connected with that food, and this gets more towards the recommendation side, what I wanted to do to extend it. So the database didn't come with food characteristics. The database came with a list of cookie, chocolate, and vanilla sandwich. And so what I wanted to do was use Neo4j and use the graph concept to get at food characteristics. So this is something, I wrote some code in R to basically parse the name, cookie and chocolate and vanilla sandwich, and then I assign characteristics kind of using a bag of words. So I would say things like, sugar elements, things that have the element of sugar are cookies, pies, cakes. So if you have that term in the food, I'm going to go ahead and tag you with that characteristic. So it's a really crude thing that I did very quickly, but actually got some pretty good results doing that. So this is the kind of the format, and I feel like this is really easy for people to understand. Let's kind of look at it, what it looks like in Neo4j. So this is my ladies who lunch slide. So there are two women having lunch. The blue nodes are the actual people. That has a connection to has an event. Unfortunately, I don't do live demonstrations because they never go well for me, but if it was a live demonstration, I could look on the has event and we could see that they are not at home, and they're both having lunch. They both eat different things, except it looks like, and I kind of know they probably shared this pie, this buttermilk pie, which happens to be a Southern American thing, apparently. They share it, and I can tell partly because they eat different amounts, and then neither one of them looks like a full serving. So what's great about this is you have a picture of data, which I get very excited about how many. That's why I use so many pictures in the presentation. You have a picture of data, but you can easily extract that to imagine what it represents. The other thing I wanted to point out is exactly about the food characteristics. So if you look at pie and buttermilk, the thing that they consume together, I split it off, and those two green ones are the characteristics. So one of the characteristics is pie, and that's mapped onto like sugar. Another characteristic is buttermilk. And what's good about the characteristics is that they link to the other characteristics of other food. So although this is buttermilk pie, it's linked to all different types of buttermilk, actual buttermilk, buttermilk non-fat, buttermilk 1%. So that characteristic tells me something else and starts to connect all the food together. So just getting back, I want to really focus on the United States because that's what I know and that's where this data comes from. So we're back at this idea of a consistent trend, obesity going up in the States. First question you ask as a data scientist is, does my data actually represent this world that I think I'm modeling? And so I did something very simple. I just looked at the top foods and drinks that were consumed. Very simple. Let's see what people are consuming the most. What's good is that there's a lot of water, bottled water. Those are the two top things. So whoever said drink water, water's important, somehow that's getting out in the United States. But the next two are lettuce and tomatoes raw, which you would think maybe that's a salad. That sounds like it could be really good in a lot of ways, and I don't want to talk in detail because I'd run out of time, but I also did a market basket analysis to look at meals and what do people eat together. So I was like, well, what's going on with this lettuce and tomato? The lettuce and tomato is what comes on the hamburgers and the sandwiches and the other things. So although it looks like, ooh, a lot of great food, it turns out, and as you go down this list, you see milk, coffee, and sugar. There's a lot of coffee, and people are putting sugar in their coffee. Ketchup, which is usually associated with some kind of fried situation. You've got cheese, you've got white rolls, you've got colas of some sort, you've got bread, you've got mayonnaise. So again, just looking at this information, you absolutely get a sense that probably looking at the right data set. There's some frequency around some things that are associated with not so great health. Yes?
So would one slice of lettuce be kind of the same as somebody having a bowl of salad?
In this instance, yes. So this is the consumption of a particular thing. I will say this particular approach, I kept this as simple as possible because, again, one of the challenges I wanted to see with Neo4j is could I build something that I can easily explain to clients in a way that they're going to understand. All business people understand a histogram and they get it. But I absolutely agree with you. There are lots of ways to kind of prove that I'm looking at the right data set. So solutions. So let me just tell you something about the United States. Every year they say there are about 108 million people who describe themselves as on a diet or working towards losing weight. It's an $80 billion industry between celebrity diets, diet books, drugs, surgeries. There is a lot of investment by American people to try and figure out how to lose weight. But as we saw from the trends, it's probably not going, as well as one would hope. So again, as a data scientist, I think, is there a technical solution? As I was thinking about this process, this came out. Beyonce came out with her own endorsed diet. It's called 22 Days, and I'm a big Beyonce fan, and I thought, okay, maybe it's something I could try. If I could look like Beyonce in 22 days, come on, that's fantastic. But as you can see, this particular plan is 100% organic. It's plant-based, perfect proportions, soy-free, gluten-free, delicious. This is very different than how the average American eats currently. And so to think that this might apply to everyone might be a little bit overreaching. Like a one-size-fits-all or what one person does may not fit for everybody. So what we know, and it's true, that we're all individuals. We have our own wants. We have our own needs. And that's one of the ways that understanding these connections can really help you, especially in Neo4j. So one of the things that I really wanted to focus on is how to make good quality recommendations. So I took an approach that looked at eating in the US specifically in kind of three phases. And I say in the US, but probably could be applied to most places, which is accessibility to food is huge. Your ability, if you're working 10 hours a day, you're not going home and having a home-cooked meal in the States. You're going out and you're having something at a restaurant or a convenience meal. So accessibility to food is really important. Nutrition is often also extremely important. And then pleasure. And I think in the United States, it's very clear we eat a lot for pleasure. We're marketed to, our food is very much marketed towards enjoyment and pleasure of the food. So that's another part of, I think, that needs to be integrated in a good recommendation. So let me talk about recommendations for a second. A lot of times when people talk about recommendations, they're really talking about personalization. They're taking user data and they're trying to use that information to make a prediction, oftentimes based on similarities. Very common. Customization is a little bit different. That's where the user gets to put in inputs, and the user has more control over what is recommended to them. So let me just talk a little bit about recommendation algorithms. So on the personalization side, what you see a lot is collaborative filtering. So if you're not familiar, think Amazon. This idea, I like some things, this other person likes similar things. So the next thing I recommend to myself is something that they liked. Very common. And I think this can work in the food space. If I like certain foods and this other person likes certain foods, it's very possible that we'll like some of the same things. Another approach in personalization is content filtering. So this is not so much about the people, but more about the content. So if you think like films and Netflix, this idea that I like films that are based on comic books that have female protagonists. If you're going to recommend something to me, recommend more films like that, that have those characteristics. And again, I think this works in the food space too, where you have different characteristics of food. If I like spicy food, recommend me more spicy food. If I like crunchy food, recommend more crunchy food. Where the food space and food recommendations, I think, gets a little bit different is the need for customization. So sometimes you have to exclude certain food categories because people have allergies or they may be vegetarians. There are things that you may not be able to see in the user data that you probably need to know to make a quality recommendation. Another thing that could be customized is your actual daily intake. So say that everyone in your family has a cold and you've decided, I think I need more vitamin C. You could put that information in the recommendation engine and find new ways to get vitamin C into your diet. So I want to argue that the winning combination is part personalization and part customization. And I say this mostly because this recommendation engine is designed to help people change their behavior, to help them get closer to healthier choices. So when personalization works, it seems like magic. It's amazing, you know me so well. And then the customization is really about having someone be a co-creator in this process. They have more ownership so that they are part of the process, which is really important to the psychological part of this. So now I'm going to get into some actual Neo4j stuff. The question, who needs help? So I have this data set, I have all this information. How do I figure out people who might be helped by using some kind of recommendation engine? And again, the focus is on things that are very simple. So what I did was I said, I really want to know people who eat very few vegetables and eat a ton of sugar. And I could do this very simply just by summing up the food characteristics of vegetables that people consumed and the food characteristics of sugar that people consumed. Very simple. The query is right there. Anyone can do it. And I just said, if you've had more than 9 sugar instances or you've had less than 1 veggie instance, I want to know about you. I think you could probably be healthier. And so I have this individual here. And he is overweight. His BMI is about 40, and he fits in that category. It's probably too small to see, but he's had like 1 vegetable instance in the past 2 days and 10 sugar instances in the past 2 days. And so that's a sign that something is kind of strange and kind of weird. But I think this is what Neo4j helped me understand, like the ease of discovery. So it's not just that it makes sense. Like, you don't eat a lot of vegetables, you eat a lot of sugar, that's going to be unhealthy. But when I looked at his graph, which is this here, he's in the center, these are all the events that he had, there was something that stuck out to me that I don't know if I would have found easily another way, which is he has a breakfast and he has a dinner for both days, but everything else is snacks or others. He has no lunch. He just seems to eat cookies, Kellogg's Special K bars, nut mixture, popcorn. He does something during the day that's not probably helpful to his health. So the recommendation can be made for him to actually sit down and eat lunch. It's very simple, but a very high quality recommendation. And so this was something that I was kind of excited about and impressed because it did kind of meet that expectation that it's easy to find out insights on individuals or patterns that are really meaningful without looking very hard for them. So let's get back to how do you change eating behavior successfully? And this is, I kind of take this from machine learning. You make changes until you get closer to your goal. It's like any game that you do. It's like anything that you're trying to find. You just make small changes. So the goal is to recommend a lunch for this guy that will make a small change that will get him closer to healthy eating. And again, going back to this idea of kind of 3 important things that you do when looking for a recommendation: accessibility. So I know that that guy ate all those snacks, he was not at home. So I have to recommend some kind of lunch solution for him that is not at home. As far as recommendation, we want something with less sugar. We want something that's less than 600 calories, which is about what lunch should be for an adult male. Maybe 750, but a little bit less. And then as far as pleasure, I wanted to find people who liked similar foods that he had, but were healthier. So going back to, again, that idea of personalization, customization. Personalization, I want to eat like people who are healthier than me, but we share food preferences. It's not that people who are healthy never eat a cookie, it's just that they eat differently. And then on the customization side, he needs a solution where he can eat out and is less than a certain amount of calories. So let's look at the personalization first and look at the query. And all of this is done like in one query, and very simply. I will say data science-wise, it can be taken up to a whole nother level, but this is, again, a very simple approach. So I said, let's just look at people who have a lot of foods in common with him, but are healthy. So this particular individual has 6 foods that are in common with this individual. In the 2 days, they ate 6 foods that are in common. There are obviously repeats, so that first number you see is how many instances of the different foods they ate. And then I also looked at how many calories they consumed given these foods. And what you'll see is the guy who is unhealthy, it's an average of like 600 calories consuming these particular foods, where the other guy has consumed these same foods and he's eaten less, like 476 calories. Now, these aren't things that are directly comparable. Statistically, it even hurts my brain a little bit. But again, it's a very simple way to explain to people. I'm comparing two people, they've got 6 foods in common. That's important because they probably like some of the same things. So once I have that person or people who could provide some recommendations, that's where I get to the customization and actually a query that gets at the lunch recommendation. So there's this guy who, eats cookies and Special K bars and a couple other things that they have in common during this 2-day period. But this guy actually eats lunch, and he has a lunch that's under 600 calories. And it's not at home. It actually comes from a convenience store. So this is kind of the point of this presentation, which is the lunch recommendation is a hot dog, some coleslaw, mustard, mayonnaise, a soft drink that has caffeine. This is nothing that a nutritionist would probably tell anybody to actually eat. But it is something that is a healthier behavior than what this guy is currently doing. So if recommended, this is probably something he's willing to do. And if recommended, it's probably something that will get him closer to his goals. So with that, I just want to talk about the limitations. Like I said, most of this was a proof of concept for me to understand, can Neo4j really help me show that a model is accessible? Can it help me explore things quickly, and can I learn things very quickly? And can I build a high quality recommendation system that would give people information that would be helpful to them? And I think it does that, and I think it does that very well. But to make it something that could go to production, or that some people that would actually be interested in, one, I need more data points. I have 2 days of information on people. That's not enough information to say, what people really eat. I think I found some fascinating things that are absolutely true, and I would stand by them, but I would want to actually do some really hardcore data science stuff, and I need more data. I also need a feedback loop. I need to know that the recommendation that I've made to someone is actually something that they might do, and if they do adhere to that recommendation, what happens? Does their health change? Can it make a difference? And then obviously adding other data points like activity, sleep, lifestyle, all those things would be really helpful. That being said, there are also possibilities here. So let's go back to Beyonce's diet. Even within this structure, I could probably help someone get closer to the Beyonce lifestyle by customizing this idea. So I'd have a query that says something like, we want all kinds of meals that don't have meat, don't have gluten, don't have soy, but I may not have enough money to buy everything organic. So I can customize it and say, just give me 20% organic or 30% organic, or a place where I can buy something that I can afford, so I can customize this experience for them. And then you can add the personalization aspect too. So maybe vegan foods that have similar food characteristics to things you already like. So if you like crunchy foods and you like your potato chips, maybe you'll really enjoy some kind of carrot salad that has this, that, and the other, so that you can make that transference or that substitution a little bit easier. A celebrity diet, sample size of 1. And I don't think people actually realize that they model their lives off of other people's smaller sample sizes. But there's power in connection, as you see with Neo4j, and really understanding the idea of bringing all these different parts of how people eat together. You're able to really understand the process and how people truly eat, and then make recommendations that are actually helpful. So that's my talk. That's my information, my Twitter handle. And I guess I have time for questions. I guess I talked a little bit. Yeah, so if you have a question, please. Thank you.